But I guess the first question I'd have to ask of the appropriators on this committee is, why are we actually here today? What is our role now as appropriators? In the last 6 months, we've seen President Trump propose a dramatic diminishment in the power of this committee and of the Congress. Now, we as the Democrats are in the minority. We don't expect to have a lot of power, but for all of us on this Appropriations Committee, why are we here? And what is our role now as appropriators? You know, everyone is so fond of saying there are Republicans and Democrats and appropriators, but really, are there appropriators anymore? Do we actually have a role in this Congress, and do we have any more power? Last week, the majority passed the rescissions package through the House, the Senate, back to the House again. And that bill eliminated spending that we had negotiated over the prior years. The hard work that we do every day in this committee, the hard work you're doing right now, the snacks that you eat, the candy that's going into your mouth, the amount of time that we take, that is all gone when we pass a rescissions bill. And how will it be any different once we pass this bill or the other bills we intend to pass this week? I truly appreciate Chairman Cole's efforts to have this committee work through these bills and pass these bills. But the question is, what are we doing? And do we have any power left anymore? Now, this bill, like so many others, will continue the damage and the cuts that this president has done over the first 6 months of his presidency. I believe what he has done is illegal, these funding freeze and rescissions, and the compound damage he has done to our agencies and our states and communities is something we will be dealing with for years. This bill in particular at the EPA cuts the funding to the states for water infrastructure by 62%, cuts grant programs that fund our state environmental programs, and slashes the EPA by 23%. Nobody benefits when we make those levels of cuts. Our states still have to do the work of water infrastructure, of permitting. And the cuts in this bill, coupled with the rescissions in the big ugly bill, will debilitate America's ability to address the climate crisis, or to address our infrastructure needs, or to make sure our vital needs in our states of permitting will be enacted. This presidency, this administration is no longer just in denial. It is actively dismissing the government's climate work and our vital environmental work. And this is work that needs to be done if we want to make sure we have a planet to hand over to our children and grandchildren. Now, at the National Park Service, this bill cuts $213 million. And this is in addition to what happened in the Big Ugly Bill, where nearly $500 million was rescinded from our national parks and our public lands. This is money that's meant to go to conservation projects and habitat restoration, and critical staffing at our national parks. This is our vital season for national parks, and Americans want to be there. And it is all compounded because we have not reauthorized the Great American Outdoors Act, which is another $1.3 billion that should be going for the maintenance backlog. This bill also funds the arts, but what a mess this administration has made of that. It was appalling to watch this administration illegally terminate thousands of grants at the NEA and the NEH. They fired nearly 80% of the NEH staff, and they revoked funding for our State Humanities Council. This is money that's meant to go to our communities, to our artists and workers, to kids in rural schools, to local economies that rely on cultural institutions and that don't have a lot of other sources for funding. They've cut the Smithsonian by 12%, the National Gallery by 11%. By cutting these funds and sidelining anything that they deem artistically and culturally offensive, they are gutting our arts and cultural institutions. I am relieved and I'm grateful to the chair of the subcommittee and the full committee that funding for tribal programs didn't suffer the same cuts. And I appreciate that bipartisan cooperation and understanding of our treaty and trust obligation. This bill also has 72 poison pill riders going after environmental protection, undermining our climate policies, and adding to our deficit. And overall, these cuts will only contribute to our struggling agencies. At the same time, while this administration is redirecting funds to tax cuts and increasing our deficit by $3.4 trillion. So I just want to go back to ending as I started this opening. OMB Director Vogt has promised to send us more rescission packages. Each time we pass a rescission package, we wipe out all the hard work we do negotiating in this committee. He said he's looking to change the paradigm in appropriations, and that appropriations has to be less bipartisan. When's the last time one of your constituents came up to you and said, you people should be less bipartisan. You people should fight more, bicker more, and do less of what we ask you to do? How often do you hear that? Now, we're appropriators, and we're all proud to get to this moment when we actually get to serve on this committee. So let's do our job. Let's be appropriators, and let's fight back for the power that goes to this committee and to our Congress. I encourage you to oppose this bill, unfortunately, and I yield back my time.
Representative Chellie Pingree, Democrat, Maine, spoke passionately against the Interior and Environment Appropriations Bill, warning that the legislation continues a troubling pattern of cuts that she believes undermine both Congress's authority and the nation's ability to meet urgent environmental, cultural, and infrastructure needs. At the heart of her remarks was a fundamental question: does the Appropriations Committee still hold any power? Pingree pointed out that, traditionally, appropriators take pride in carefully negotiating budgets and working across party lines to ensure federal resources are allocated fairly. But she argued that this process has been repeatedly eroded by the Trump administration's reliance on rescission packages. These packages, passed by the majority in both chambers, effectively claw back funding that had already been agreed upon in prior negotiations. According to Pingree, this has left members of the committee wondering what role they actually play if their work can be undone so easily. She noted that the latest bill before the committee adds to the damage already caused by previous rescissions. Among the most striking examples are cuts to the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. State water infrastructure funding, which supports essential projects such as wastewater treatment and safe drinking water systems, would be slashed by 62%. The EPA itself would see its budget reduced by 23%, while state-level grant programs that fund basic environmental oversight and permitting would be hollowed out. Pingree warned that these reductions would severely limit America's ability to tackle climate change, protect public health, and maintain essential infrastructure. The National Park Service was another major target of her concerns. The bill cuts $213 million from its budget at a time when parks are struggling with record visitors and deferred maintenance needs. This comes on top of nearly $500 million rescinded earlier in the year, which had been earmarked for conservation projects, habitat restoration, and seasonal staffing. Pingree reminded her colleagues that Americans cherish their parks, especially during peak summer months, yet Congress has failed to reauthorize the Great American Outdoors Act, which would have provided an additional $1.3 billion to address the long-standing maintenance backlog. Beyond environmental and infrastructure concerns, Pingree also called out the administration's actions against cultural institutions. She described it as appalling that thousands of grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, NEA, and the National Endowment for the Humanities, NEH, were suddenly terminated. Nearly 80% of NEH staff were dismissed, and funding for state humanities councils was revoked. These cuts, she argued, strike directly at local economies and rural schools that rely on arts and cultural programs to thrive. The bill further reduces funding for the Smithsonian Institution by 12% and the National Gallery of Art by 11%, limiting opportunities for education, tourism, and community engagement across the country. While most of the bill was framed as damaging, Pingree did acknowledge one area where bipartisan cooperation prevailed: tribal programs. She expressed gratitude that these programs were shielded from severe cuts, reflecting recognition of the federal government's treaty and trust obligations. However, the rest of the bill, she said, is loaded with 72 poison pill policy riders. These riders aim to weaken environmental protections, roll back climate policies, and stall progress on addressing the climate crisis. To make matters worse, she noted that the administration's approach to budgeting is adding to the national deficit. With federal resources being redirected toward tax cuts, she said, the deficit has ballooned by $3.4 trillion while core public services are left underfunded. Pingree ended her remarks with a pointed warning. Mick Mulvaney, then director of the Office of Management and Budget, had openly promised more rescission packages in the future, signaling a deliberate effort to change the paradigm of appropriations and make it less bipartisan. Pingree rejected that vision, insisting that no American constituents are asking Congress to fight more or be less cooperative. Instead, she urged her colleagues to reclaim the committee's rightful role, oppose the bill, and stand against what she described as an administration intent on dismantling Congress's constitutional power over the purse.